Pope Francis making his way out of the Basilica, but stopping to greet some young children on his way out.
Shall we
The hymn
finish?
continues as this evening's celebration of penance and the consecration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all for joining together. This was very moving.
I only had one regret, and that is I didn't see or hear Mary Undoer of Knots.
Oh, it was there.
Was it earlier before I got on?
No,
No.
it was within the text of the of the consecration. It was alluded to something like, undoing the knots of that we have put ourselves into, or
I
something.
missed it a bit.
It was along with that reference to Guadalupe. You know that I'm your mother. So
You are able
So-
to, here it is, you are able to untie the knots of our hearts and of our times. Just after she says that, am I not here, I who am your mother?
mhm.
Yeah, so.
Hey, Gary, where are you reading that from?
Well,
What are you?
Our bishop sent out a link, the prayer. So I just.
Oh, he
printed it
did.
up.
Oh,
Yeah, Tom sent that to us too.
Yeah.
did he?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
it's
intending
an
to print it
attachment.
out, but I never got around to it yet.
Yeah, it's an attachment to one of Tom's messages.
One of my many messages.
There are a lot of messages,
Yeah.
a lot.
And so I was thinking,
And now that everything's over, George Crook, the old skeptic, is coming on.
Gotta get a cup of coffee before George comes on. I don't want to miss one golden word.
Oh my
was it-
goodness. George.
Hello there.
Hello,
what are
George.
you? What are you doing, George?
Well, I'm resting.
You look like you're. What are you giving, a rectal exam or what?
Well, one lives in hope, but no, I had some weird episode last night of decreasing blood pressure, or no blood pressure almost. So paramedics, and so here I am at Providence Hospital for observation, and lo and behold, I got pneumonia.
Oh, geez.
Oh.
Wow.
Fun.
Geez.
So, but no biggie. I mean, it was kind of big at the time when
Yeah.
you're lying there and suddenly the paramedics come into your house and they put you on your floor and they're working over you quite feverishly for a while. Very impressive. First world medicine is a good thing,
We're blessed. Yep.
Oh my God, I just saw myself in the screen. Do I look feeble and ill and hospitalized and sick?
Yes, you do.
Well, some of it's true, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, George, hey, George, how do you feel right now?
I feel fine right now. Last night I didn't feel so fine.
That must have been right after you sent
Right.
your, it must have been right after you sent the email to me.
It was.
Yeah.
It was my snarky email.
Yeah, well, I guess Mary got back to you. got back.
Well, that was the thrust of my email. She was telling us what happens when we piss her off. Whole nations get annihilated. I mean, not just the biggest part of a nation, but the whole nation, and more than one. You know, don't piss off a Jewish mother, I guess. I don't.
And hey, George, has this episode happened before to you?
Yeah, I think so. Once,
Do you?
yeah. So I have a cardiologist, and you know, everything will be fine. I just don't know why this happened yesterday.
Was
I
it
just taken a
pneumonia?
very hot shower, and I was sitting there talking to Betty, and all of a sudden I said, "Gee, I can't get up." You know,
Hmm.
Had you had a drink? Siri? Had you had
I was having a very small one,
okay.
Irish whiskey. That'll teach me.
No.
George, was your previous episode also pneumonia?
No, I'm not sure this was actually, because I started up again with a CPAP machine, and that has a humidifying component, you know. So we'll see, but no, but I'll keep you guys posted by email. It looks fine. But meanwhile, what's the state of the world and the church?
Well,
Well, here's one brief reflection. The contrast between the prayer that Pope Francis just read and the NATO gathering, you know, of arms and sending arms to Ukraine. It seems like a real paradox of is there such a thing as arms for peace? You know, it's really kind of strange, you know.
But what's the alternative?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Don't go Dorothy Day on this, George.
No, I'm not. I'm just reflecting on the contrast of today and yesterday, you know.
What's your
Well, I thought
sense,
Francis
George?
wrote a beautiful prayer.
Oh, yeah.
Tom, I'm glad. You know, I don't follow all the threads. I don't always look at my emails. In fact, in the next couple of days, I have to delete a couple thousand of them, I think. But
Oh God!
I just don't. I'm just not on this computer often. But I really appreciate that you did this. That was very moving. The Pope's prayer was very moving, especially at this time. I don't see a good way.
I thought this homily was very moving too.
I didn't see that.
Who will,
you're going to send that where that is, are you, in the video?
Right.
The talk, because
right.
homily.
You know, when you share a YouTube video, you can actually pinpoint a spot where that should start for the viewer.
Oh,
Right.
So it'll be the link to the whole video, but then it will have a little extension on it as to just exactly what point to start.
Oh, all right. You're going to
very
send
cool.
I will send it when we're finished talking, and
Yeah.
I'm going to send another little story that makes use of that has happened to me fairly recently that you might just find kind of interesting. But so Gary, if you are hearing what I'm saying, even though you're not there, be sure to check my next email.
That's a good tease.
That
Got my attention.
so Bob, is a Pope put his hand on the boy and girl there?
Yeah.
I thought to myself, there are two future priests.
Good call.
Oh, you're
May
presumptuous
we
there.
live to see it, George.
I don't think we will, gentlemen.
Step by step. I think it will happen.
It has to, it doesn't it?
Well, at least, among the 4 active remaining in ministry priests here, at least one has children who may live to see it. Or
That's right, huh, Frank?
Right,
What did
Frank?
you say, Frank?
Yeah, well, I have grandchildren too, so.
Well, your
Well, they may
DNA
live to
is
see
charging ahead.
women priests.
Yeah, I would think so. The grandchildren, I'm not entirely sure that, I mean, it becomes a numbers game, but I'm not entirely sure that the children will, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some pediatricians say over 50% of children born today will live to be 100.
In the first world.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, just a quick aside. The state of medical care in the first world in LA is just nothing short of astounding. Just, paramedics come to your house, they stabilize you, and off you go in an ambulance, and here you come received into the bowels of this hospital, and people are there. I must have passed through the hands of, I don't know, 20, 30 people yesterday.
Wow.
And here I am alive,
Yeah.
We're happy
Think it
about
would've-
that.
Hmm?
We're happy about that.
Well, yeah, thank you.
And you also logged on. It's great to see you.
Yeah. That's because my dear wife was kind enough to bring my iPad.
Bless her heart. Tell her thanks.
I shall. I have. But,
Actually, it's good to see your whole face rather than just a part of you, which you usually have when you're sitting at that desk.
yeah, well, I'll try to keep that in mind. But wow. Anyway,
Can I ask
So-
a question? Why did they select, and maybe it's out of my ignorance, I asked the question, why did they select a statue of the Lady of Fatima for this consecration service?
well, it's due to her threats that they're doing it. I'm trying to be funny when I say it.
Well, as they showed it, I thought they could have picked a Pietà
Yeah.
Well,
in a sense, if you wanted to bring out the horrors of war.
Isn't the consecration of Russia connected to the promises at Fatima?
I think so.
yeah.
That may be.
Many of us see those as
Yeah.
promises and hopefully, some of us see it as threats.
Yeah.
George.
Well, however you see it, it's connected
Yeah.
to the whole story of Fatima,
Yeah, I
consecration
read
of Russia.
The other
I
thing is
read
the
the-
big criticism among some people, and they're the Fatima devotees, but they're in sizable numbers and very vocal, is that none of the popes have, properly consecrated Russia to Mary as Mary had ordered it to be
Demanded.
done. And so I think he wanted to preserve the continuity with Fatima.
I think that makes great sense. Yeah.
And let's face it, Fatima happened right at the beginning of World War I.
Yeah.
No, towards the end, George.
No, it
towards the
happened 3 years after the war. It was 17 for Fatima, and the war
Right.
started in 14, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
And then I was, and I'm not going to take a George Crook attitude about things, but I mean, Russia is obviously, in my opinion, an aggressive, militaristic country with respect to Ukraine. Why are we dedicating Russia to her protection? They're being assholes. I mean, I can understand the Ukrainian consecration, but the consecrating Russia, I mean, I'm missing something. Maybe that's just my narrow-mindedness.
I see it as a prayer for conversion. That consecration is for grace of conversion.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's a consecration of the people and of the culture. And unfortunately, right now, they have a disposition and leadership that wants to use violence.
Well, there is another element too. Mary did specifically request, according to the reports of Fatima, did specifically request the consecration of Russia. And, you know, to me, that ties in with another thing. That was a point Jesus made very, 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 very strongly, is love your enemies. Pray especially for your enemies.
Mhm.
And maybe the best weapon against your enemy is actually to pray for your enemy. You know, it's a paradox, but as Chesterton pointed out, the following of Christ is filled with paradoxes.
True. Also, I was impressed at how strong the sacrament of reconciliation was in the procedures of today.
Yeah.
So is this being too empirical or literalistic? How will we track what Mary does as a result of this consecration?
Well,
Not too sure there are statistical measurements for that sort of thing.
Well, it seems to me we just
Yes.
need to pay attention to what unfolds, which is going to unfold over time. And, you know, I think there's two things we might see. One would be that for some reason or another, whatever it is, that the Russians, you know, continue the pullback that reportedly is happening in some sectors of the Ukraine, and that they're going to look and try to come to terms, and that the prayer of Mary might be a factor in that. On the other hand, you know, this war might last a long time because there just isn't a response to the call of God for peace.
Mhm.
And what happens if Putin escalates to chemical warfare or limited nukes?
Yeah.
We're screwed.
Well, I was just reading about, maybe you've seen that too, where there's a group called the Wagner Group, Wagner, that they're sent to assassinate
Oh,
Zelensky. Yeah, they're kind of a
Mercenary.
private military group of
Yeah,
thugs, I
they're
guess.
mercenaries.
Yeah, mercenaries.
but that was thwarted, wasn't it, George?
What's that?
That was thwarted. That was,
Well, apparently, well, I don't know if it sounds like it's ongoing, like
oh,
they haven't given up. Yeah, like
They're on the
Yeah.
ground in Ukraine.
yeah,
is that right?
They're in, you know, that's why the Ukrainians are stopping everybody and checking them.
yeah,
Because they've kind of worked into the,
yeah.
what are the odds that Zelensky will live through this? They've got to be pretty poor.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, what a heroic figure he is.
But then what happens if they do take him out? I mean, I don't see any good end to this unless somehow, you know, maybe there was an article, there was a Commonweal a couple of months ago, there was a editorial that they were talking about the fact that I should get it, but that there were both Ukraine and Russia, there were already some sort of treaties that they needed to abide by. And
Yeah,
at the time, the editors of Commonweal were saying
Oh, they did testify.
both Ukraine and Russia need to be faithful to what they already agreed to, you know, and so, I mean, right now, we see, and
That's why we-
there's no way of getting around it. I mean, Ukraine is the offended party, but maybe there are things that Zelensky can do to help as they're negotiating. I think yesterday, the Secretary General of the UN say that there was, from the people he's talked to, there have been a lot of progress made, and he said to the point where hostilities could cease now. I don't know, but
Well, what I'm wondering is if there's.
and maybe that's where it will show, George. I don't know.
Because the mask, it covers. his-
Hey, George Crook,
It seems
you
to
should
Yeah.
me
mute, you should mute yourself because there's a lot of background noise.
You know what? That's my wife taking a phone call.
Oh.
Betty, could you just go outside and do that?
Or just-
Hey, Betty,
Hi, Betty.
say hi to us, Betty.
I don't think she can hear you because she's got the phone in her ear.
Oh.
Yeah, she is leaving us.
Now
Your
we can't.
collateral damage, Betty,
As usual.
as usual, she says. Okay, Tim, it'll be better now, I think.
No, it just was, Gary was making some good points and it was getting kind of cluttered. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Well, before we get back to Gary's points, Johnny, notice the coffee mug that I have.
I wish I had mine with me.
Do you
I'm
have
up at Palm Desert. You can see it's a little different location for me.
Tom, do you have a coffee mug for every liturgical feast or what?
No,
Well, it's like the Orthodox and their icons, you know, they have icons for their major feasts of the liturgical year.
right. No, there are just a few friends that I have that if they, I have to be careful what I say, because if I express some kind of interest in anything, some kind of gift like a
Yeah.
coffee mug
Yeah, yeah.
comes along.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about how interested you are in some large donation being put into your bank account?
Or
Yeah.
Bitcoin, or
Well, that's-
Bitcoin.
That's very interesting, yeah.
But I just hope that the negotiation, I mean, I hope that they can come to some sort of, but I should go look at what Commonweal said, but I mean that obviously if they're gonna end this thing, I don't know. I mean, there's got to be something that they could both mutually agree on. I don't know. I don't see it ending. I don't know how this is going to end. At all.
I'm with you, Gary, alas.
There you are.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's Papa Francisco.
Let me toss this out there. Gary, you mentioned negotiations. As a mediator for many years working with disputing parties, I always think, how come there wouldn't be a mediator? A mediator tries to help the parties be civil, listen to each other, put the issues down, see what they can agree to in common, maybe expand their thinking about the costs of the conflict, et cetera, and brings like a different type of energy into the scene. A good mediator does. Maybe you've experienced that, but negotiators are just there. They're kind of locked in a certain sense. But the bigger picture from somebody who's affiliated with neither side, I just wonder why that isn't done more. I keep thinking there should be a mediator meeting with Zelensky and Putin or the representatives thereof, and to try to help them think. For example, I had a cost benefit analysis I would give parents going through a bitter custody dispute, and they could, everything from how many hours a week are you spending in stress and upset and anxiety because of this? How much money are you spending on attorneys and legal fees?
Tim's
what has
screen
happened?
has just improved.
Hey, there's a, anyway, that's just a thought. I just wanted to put that out there because as a mediator, I keep thinking of some third presence, force that could go out there and help people get beyond their, kind of quantum physics even points toward that type of thing, more energy or releasing more energy. So,
That was successfully done with Northern Ireland.
Yeah, Senator Mitchell did that effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe the Balkans as well, under Clinton.
Part of the
It seems
problem
like-
seems to me Putin basically, first of all, I still am convinced this is, as much as anything, fundamentally a religious war. And
Whoa.
one that began in with the Orthodox Western split. And the West is the enemy. Anybody who could possibly be a mediator is, in Putin's eyes, part of the enemy.
Well, you presume that mediator would have to come from the West, but perhaps it could be Chinese.
Sure.
That could very well, hadn't thought of that.
Or it could be somebody who had a Ukrainian and Russian parent.
And there are a lot of
It
such
could-
people.
Yeah,
Sure,
it could
yeah.
be
Yeah.
just somebody who's really able to help them communicate and pull out, look at various aspects of what's going on. And because I think of, I think of domestic violence scenarios, of which I witnessed a lot, but to me, it's like domestic abuse. Russia is beating up on a partner, and then you expect the person to love you or want to be with you. I used to have, in domestic violence cases, I would have the party, I said, pinch your ear, grab your ear and pinch it real hard and let go. And after you do that, what feels any pain, the fingers or the ear? And people, oh, it's the ear. While the person experiencing domestic violence has a great degree of feeling, more so than the perpetrator. The perpetrator walks away and everything's fine, but the abused person isn't going to come back and love that person. You can't have love and fear coexisting.
I think the problem with my Chinese idea is, and listening to you, Ferrick, is that a mediator doesn't have any skin in the game.
Right.
It's true.
Right. Yeah, they don't have any skin in the game, right?
China has got a ton of skin in this game.
Yeah.
And so would, I don't know.
Well, I think China has some good skin in it, in as much as, imagine what would happen if China moved in and solved this, where it would put them, rank them in the world.
Wow.
I mean, so the rivalry they have in terms of world leadership with the United States would in fact be rocketed if they did this. And the skin in their game isn't so much that Russia adds anything to them.
What did you say?
It's basically that Russia's kind of a help in terms of their opposition to the United States. And so if they got involved as a mediator, they wouldn't need Russia.
Good point.
This would achieve their goal almost immediately. So one wonders if there's something going on in the background, because the Chinese have really not taken a side in all of this. They played the Russian thing, but they've abstained in votes. They've said that such violence is not to be pursued, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not acting as Russia's best friend in this whole thing.
The Pope would be great, except Kirill will never stand for that.
But there could be a team of mediators, a man and a woman. That would be even better. Instead of just having one mediator, you could have a team. Again, you could have different energy, different perspectives, different ways of bringing out discussion about what's going on. Anyway, when they talk about, I think, when Zelensky, when he gave his talk to Congress, he talked about the need for some kind of something like new world order, right? A new group, a way that people could resolve problems, that there would almost be like a strike force, whatever that means, a think tank, or whenever these things come up, there'd be some procedure for dealing with them, because now we've got, there's North Korea, there's Pakistan, India, Iran's trying to get nuclear weapons, there's Russia, China, United States. That's a lot of players in the nuclear game. We thought it was kind of under control because people that experienced Nagasaki and Hiroshima, knew what the heck would happen. And these weapons are so much, from what I've read, just astounding in their impact, much more so.
Yeah.
Not to mention
Is
the
there-
radioactivity that would go into the atmosphere
Yeah.
and, have all kinds of repercussions in wildlife, crops, everybody who comes into contact with it. Talk about hospitals getting overloaded with patients, and everybody would be affected by it, right?
Is there any hope for reconciliation at this time between Pope Francis and the Russian Orthodox leadership? No
In the
way.
short run.
Yeah, I'd say no.
Yeah.
Francis would love to do that, but they see the Roman churches after their people. The Pope is closer to the ecumenical patriarch in Istanbul, and so they wouldn't trust him. He's willing, but they wouldn't trust him.
Yeah.
Well, and in traditional religious terms, which I think is very much alive, particularly in the Russian brand of Orthodoxy, is that the Pope and the ecumenical patriarch are heretics. The Pope and the whole Western Church is obviously, in their eyes, heretical. I think you might still say, I don't know, that statement of the Orthodox scholars based in, I think it was Fordham last week, it rejected as part of authentic Orthodoxy the view that the West is heretical, and particularly the view that the ecumenical patriarch is guilty of heresy.
Not just schismatic, but heretical.
Heretical, yeah. And
What's
that
the
was,
heresy?
well, the heresy is that you don't recognize the authority of the Third Rome. I think I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that there is something to that particular perspective. It is a very hardened them against us view that Carroll has.
And
How much power, maybe that's not the right word, where does the Virgin Mary fit with the Russian Orthodox spirituality? I'm thinking of today's dedication and whether that's in any way a potential wedge.
For openers, I think it may be because she fits very highly. On the other hand, the content of this consecration is to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is based on the doctrine, which they feel is heretical, of the um, of the Immaculate Conception.
Mhm.
I'm not so sure that I would say heretical. It just is not in any way a part of their religious view, because the Immaculate Conception is based on an Augustinian understanding of original sin.
How about today's Feast of the Annunciation?
Well,
Oh,
I think that's really interesting that, you know, I think it's very confusing. You have Our Lady of Fatima, you have the Immaculate Conception, you have the Annunciation all going at once.
And
Yeah.
Immaculate
And you're
Heart.
talking about Orthodox churches and you never mentioned Theotokos,
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
which is the fundamental point of the Annunciation.
Which is a fundamental point of the Annunciation. And actually, that's the fundamental point of the Immaculate Conception too.
Well, it's a different angle, if
Yeah,
you will.
but you know, the Immaculate Conception exists because Mary is Theotokos.
Right. But the simple celebration of that reality on today,
Yeah.
and the fact that it was never meant, there's got to be some story behind the creation of that prayer that leads what I think is a certain amount of confusion between Mary as the Immaculate Conception, Mary as the one who appeared at Fatima, and Mary as the Theotokos or Theotokos. I don't know how you pronounce it.
How about
As the Christ
Mary?
bearer.
Not to mention, Mary is a peasant woman that I would like to see as my sister rather than mother. You know, I would see her as a contemporary. I don't see Mary as some 60-year-old woman. I see her as a 30-year-old person that would be my sister, Sister Mary.
George,
That's kind of
hate
a
to
twist
tell
I
you-
have.
I hate to
and
tell you,
I've-
George, if she's 30, she ain't no contemporary of any of ours.
Well, interiorly, I'm 30. Externally, forget it.
Yeah.
I don't go by the way I look in the mirror. I go from the me behind my eyes looking out where I don't have any wrinkles or
George,
You
George,
have that, those cataracts and that.
Just-
Yeah.
a grown kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, let me toss this out there. You know, when I hear, you know, because I've gone a bit sideways in my spiritual journey, you know, into Buddhism somewhat, as well as many other things. But it, you know, and I hear the Dalai Lama who says, my religion is kindness. There's no dogma there. There's no doctrine. It has to do with the way people act towards each other. And I just think this whole thing of dogma and doctrine comes from a male going off into the intellectual domains in the mid 10 centuries ago. And we haven't recovered from it because women were out of the picture pretty much. I mean, there's Hildegard of Bingen, Julian of Norwich, and other people, St. Teresa of Avila. But in the world of therapy, there's been a big emphasis away from cognitive therapy to feeling. Rational emotive therapy is one mode that came in, but there's a whole new wave of therapy that's based on feelings and emotions. You know, and when I think about theology, a lot of it's been pretty rational and people differing with each other because of a dogma or one phrase, homoousios or whatever it is. You know, is what would Jesus say about that? What the heck would he say? Is that what he came to teach people? So that kind of, you know, this whole doctrinal thing, to me, it gives a lie to, you know, I can see why people become irreligious. Say, that's not my God, you know, passing over doctrine. You know, when you're dying, are you going to say, do you believe in this or that? No, you want somebody to hold your hand as you go out, you know, I don't know.
well,
I just think there's something beyond that is being missed by all these doctrinal differences. I know it's based in history and so forth, but when it leads to war and people hating each other, that's not what Jesus did.
No, I don't think Putin invaded the Ukraine because of his orthodoxy.
It has to do with NATO.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tim, I agree with you because I would be seeing Trump as a Christian.
yeah.
Trump is not a Christian,
Well, no.
and
No.
Putin's not a devout Christian. Do you think?
Not for me to say.
Yeah.
You know,
But I
and
do
the-
think, I think
when the
Putin,
Orthodox
I think
Church,
Putin,
I'm sorry,
Putin thinks that the Orthodox Church is an institution that will help him restore the Russian Empire.
Right.
Yes,
Sure.
yes.
Right.
So he has a distinct interest in it. And from our side, to some extent, you hear these rumblings about Kirill, that he's actually a KGB agent.
Yes. Right.
And so he's very much a Putin ally.
Yes.
And so has the Russian Orthodox Church been completely co-opted, or maybe not co-opted? Maybe he too wants the church to be an element in the new Russian Empire.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
just like it was in the Tsarist Empire.
Mhm.
Putin, I think, is sort of trying to get back what
Right.
the ideal of the Russian Empire under the Tsars was.
Have you guys seen any of the articles about I'm going to use the term cathedral, I don't know if it's the right one, the cathedral that I think the Russian state has financed to, it's a homage to the Russian military.
Yeah.
And the chaplaincy of the Orthodox, during World War II, etc. And apparently, from the pictures, this church is, well, just a homage to the military sacrifices of Russia, particularly in World War II, which were unbelievable, as we know. And that's like a nerve center of the new Russian state, from what I've read.
Yeah. And it includes, I don't know, fresco or mosaic of Putin himself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think Putin put that on hold and said he didn't think it should be a living, not while he's alive, in other words, but
How modest.
the plan is, yeah, I think I sent out an article about that too in one of my many email sharings.
Maybe since you're all in Los Angeles, maybe he can get Nava to do a tapestry of him that he can hang in there.
Oh, God.
It's not just the Roman Empire either that I think the Russian patriarch is extending the Russian church out into other sectors of the world. So I think they've established a couple in Africa, maybe one in Egypt, one in Jerusalem, I think, that they are trying to establish the Russian Orthodox presence, not just in, that they're going to have a strong empire again, the Russian Empire of old. They, in a certain sense, I think their notion is they've got it right, we've got it wrong, so they really want to take over the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And do it right, because we're doing it wrong.
Right.
I'd like to go back to George Farag. I do think the Russian Orthodox and Putin are demeaning the feminine side, but George Farag, I've been recently pitching to George Crook and Ned Shavira the Catherine of Siena Institute and the Called and Gifted program that is oriented to how we are evangelized and called to use our charisms in the world. And Tom and George, maybe each of you have some exposure, but I think I'm passionate about that.
Yeah, and here comes Ned. There he is,
Hello, Ned.
Ed,
Yeah,
connecting to audio. Okay, there he is. We see you. You hear us? Hello, Ned.
Hi, Tom.
There we go.
hey, Ned.
Tim, are you there? Is that you?
yes.
Hi, Gary. I can't see any, like, I see John and me. That's it.
There's Crook and, well, change your view.
You must have the gallery view somewhere.
Yeah, I've got it here. There's 9 of us here. Let's see.
Yeah. And there's
And
George
wait till
Crook in
you
his hospital bed.
I've got
Wait until you see George Crook.
George is in bed.
Hey, everybody's gonna be somewhere, you know, as the hippie said.
Well, he was, a couple of weeks ago when Fred was
What
in the
happened?
hospital bed, George was jealous of all the attention that Lawrence got. So George said, well, Fred shouldn't hog all of the attention and sympathy.
I can top this.
Yeah.
He takes his nap very seriously.
Indeed. I'll call you up after this and explain why I am where I am,
Okay.
which is, where am I? Providence Hospital,
Which one?
in Burbank.
Oh, okay.
He's not in Torrance, huh?
Yeah. But I didn't see it too well when I was being wheeled in from the ambulance. I think I'm in Burbank.
Uh-huh.
So fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something Ferry was talking about earlier about,
Well, wait, Tim, before you do, did we adequate John's thing about called and gifted?
Oh, no.
In the-
Well, I'm really all for that. I'm sorry to get here so late. Got a million excuses here. But anyway, has anybody talked, you guys have talked about called and gifted?
Just started.
Oh. Good. I'm
And
100%.
The topic seems to be focusing on what might be the possibilities of mediation in this Russian, Ukrainian, Russian, rest of the world conflict that is unfolding drastically.
Yeah, Ned, rather than negotiating,
let's
two
not go.
parties, mediation, you've probably been involved in some mediations.
Yes,
Yeah.
many, yeah. You think you can get Putin in there? I from what I've read, what little I've read, or a lot, it sounds like Putin is faking anything other than crushing these people.
Mhm.
That is one view, is that if he can't occupy the country or depose Zelensky or to install a puppet, et cetera, well, at least I can level and smash the place. And that he can do.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of views about historical and cultural reasons why he really has some basis for it, which, I don't know anything about it except that, back in 900, 1000, there was the Rus, and it was all somehow interconnected. But, to try to use that as a reason to interfere with a country that's built itself and has such great resources and apparently a wonderful president, at least with respect to protecting and advocating for his country in this kind of situation, I don't think that matters.
How does he take the position that we are one people, we Russians and the Ukrainians? And if we're not going to be one people, I'm just going to smash the shit out of their country. As it were, sow salt in the Kiev, you know, a la Carthage. It's a bit inconsistent.
But let me ask you, I've been wondering, what if they said, okay, what if he takes over and he installs a puppet? Don't you think, and you know history better than I do, how can he rule, if you will, a country that doesn't want him? Can you imagine anybody who's, look, okay, you're the mayor of Mariupol, just watch your back now. I mean, there's going to be, if you got a people that's totally against you, how do you, other than, you know, a police state, I guess that's the only way. Is that what would happen in Ukraine? I mean,
But the police state concept is not feasible in Ukraine. I mean, when Hungary was invaded in 56 by the Soviets, and when Czechoslovakia in 68, there was an enormous Soviet military presence in those countries. But you know, my son has been deployed to the Ukraine 3 times over the last couple of years for training. He's a major in there. And he said, you know, we have spent so much energy, NATO has, training these guys in hybrid warfare. You know, they're not going to put 400 tanks in a row and go marching off against the Russians. They are really trained in guerrilla warfare. So to your point, Gary,
yeah.
I think if you installed a puppet regime, it would be, look, in 2014, they toppled a dictator.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how they can even begin to think of how he can begin to think about, okay, there you are. What are you going to do now? I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to have everybody you just have to watch your back every single second if you're part of any administrative, it seems to me, I can't imagine.
Well, yeah, because the administrator represents the person that just destroyed all your buildings and killed your grandkids and and the mothers in the maternity hospital. Yeah, I agree.
Is Putin that in living in an illusion of what he can bring about?
Quién sabe?
Well, Hitler did it, huh?
You know that series on Netflix that I was recommending, Rebellion?
Yes, that's wonderful.
About the Irish. It starts with the Easter Rebellion in 1915. It just goes forward well into the 20s, when Britain ultimately had to throw up its hands and get the heck out of there, but for the 6 counties of the north.
Yeah.
Right, Frank? Isn't that what historically?
Yeah, and I always find this an interesting thing because, for example, my parents were born in Ireland, and they came here, but some of their first cousins and relatives went to England. So what if England decided to invade Ireland now? And you have first cousins fighting first cousins.
Yes.
You've got some of that going on in this particular thing.
Yeah.
You know, the British took their Crimea, which was the 6 counties in the north of Ireland, because it's called Ulster, but it's not Ulster because there are 9 counties in Ulster. But only 3 of them would give them a British majority. If they had the 9, they would have stayed in Ireland. So they partitioned in order to get what they want. So, you know, there's a certain pattern here that, you know, let me say the motivation is a little bit different. The civilization of the British now is different than it was then, but there's this certain pattern that, you know, you get this creep, you take some of the land and then you move in. You know, the Crimea, for instance, was not, Stalin gave Crimea to Ukraine in 1942. They didn't own it. It was part of Russia. So there's a certain sense, I'm sure, in his mind that he's taken back what's basically theirs.
Mhm.
and then protecting the Russian speakers, even though it appears that in cities, some of the cities that have been bombed, that a majority Russian speakers are absolutely diametrically opposed to what he's doing. So I can't see anything other than that he's using them as an instrument to build the Russian Empire, and the rest of it be damned, and that no one around him is, there's beginning to see cracks, like this large guy who was very prominent in his inner, not quite in his inner circle, but defected to Turkey, and that the Russian defense minister hasn't been seen in public with Putin since the thing started. A Russian general who's very stoic talking to an American reporter and kind of breaking up when he's talking about it. So we don't know what's going on there. And, frankly, that's probably dangerous with respect to him. But I think he's driven mainly by the Russian Empire, and he has allies like Kirill who are egging him on, if you will.
Boy.
Another dimension of that that I've understood is he's got a small circle around himself that he trusts and nobody else. And those that are around him, he trusts them because they say yes, Mr. Putin, President Putin. I mean, they
Sounds like
don't
Hitler
challenge him.
all over again.
Say again.
Sounds like Hitler all over again.
Hitler and I think other leaders as well. They get their position, they're going to hang on to it, and nobody should challenge them. And so they're sort of toadies. Now, that's my sense that that's the situation he's in. And when you see some of the images of him, I mean, to my mind, it's ridiculous. He's sitting by himself at the far end of a big, long table.
Right. Yeah.
And his main military people are way down at the other end. And when he has, the French president there, he's way down at the other end. It's like, don't get close to me. I'm in charge.
All that goes against Peter Drucker's management model, where he welcomed Plan B, people that had Plan B in their board meeting. He said it's good to have that, because if Plan A doesn't work, then you've got the people that brought up the prospect of Plan B.
I'm sure
it probably goes against the French president too. He probably bought a beautiful bottle of French wine.
Yeah. I saw
a little bit reminiscent of that famous scene in Citizen Kane, where the husband and wife increasingly put more distance between themselves at the dinner table.
Oh, yeah. Well, George, I bet you that Vladimir Putin doesn't give a fuck about Peter Drucker.
You're right. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
He doesn't want to read the latest latest management theory.
How to be an effective executive. Yeah.
It appears to me that the glue is fear. In those sessions, I've only seen 2 of the sessions where the long table is there and his minions are on one side and on the other. But the first one that I saw, Putin was just laying all over one of the guys. He says, "Well, we think we've got it. You think? Well, I can't define it completely. Define it. Be particular. What is it?"
Yeah. That guy,
tongue-tied.
That guy is now under house arrest.
Oh,
is he?
He's their intelligence chief.
Right?
Yeah.
He's in house. Is that true, George?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
well, all of us here in Los Angeles are used to that with Benjamin Hawks, that type of treatment.
Yes, absolutely.
In the Chancery.
Just like that, exactly.
And McIntyre, yeah.
I don't know. It's just hard to. You thought it's interesting. You live your life and you feel like you're in a stable place. All of a sudden, that the whole world right now just feels unstable.
Yeah.
Just totally unstable. And thank God we've lived at least 70 or almost 80 years of life. I mean, I don't know how much longer. I don't know where it's all going to go, but the fundamental stability that we kind of presume is beginning to be shaken.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's somewhat like we rolled the clock back or the tape back, because in the first 20 years or so of the 20th century,
Yeah.
we had a worldwide pandemic and a war that started because tensions in Europe were set off.
Mhm.
World War I, which was called, by the way, the war to end all wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this is a replay,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
But it's a little bit different too. It seemed like, I had this sense during the Cold War era that both Russia and the United States had a sense of what could be done. And they said, well, we're not going to get into it because it will cause so much damage. There was, call it enlightened self-interest. But in the recent decades, there have been religious fanatics that will be willing to kill themselves and blow themselves up at a market, to kill 100 civilians, that type of attitude of, I'm doing this and I will be rewarded for it, with 1,000 maidens in heaven type of thing. So somebody could be so deranged that they will do something like that, and there's some evangelicals that even believe, well, come on, bring on the Armageddon. We've been reading about that for years. We want the second coming of Christ. You know what I mean? There's people that won't have that enlightened self-interest. They're willing to just do some crazy stuff. And we've seen it, right? Or we've heard about it, people that will go and blow themselves up.
Yeah,
in the
I think
middle of
it's
a
only
mosque.
27 virgins that they're promised, not 1,000.
Well,
Okay,
9/11 is a perfect example.
Let me
of that.
make a note here.
Yeah,
Ned,
let's
what
not
were you
forget
saying?
how many-
At my age, one's too many.
I'm
Is
with
it-
you, Tim.
is-
Anyway,
now, I mean, is it just a question of degree between that and attacking the United States Capitol while the legislature's in process?
Wow.
Yeah, that could happen.
well, it did.
Well,
did.
we've had TV programs that have that happen, right? Wasn't there a program about the remaining, the whole Congress was blown up?
Lone survivor.
Yeah, right. The lone, whatever it was, and there was somebody who had been designated as the leader. I forget the name of but that could happen.
Like jam the torpedoes. In the most extreme version of it, it's my life. But in a less extreme but related version of it, it's my liberty or whatever. In order, my livelihood, whatever I have to expend in order to get what I want.
Yeah, and that motivated the attack on the Capitol.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think what if Donald Trump were president right now? What would happen? I mean, would Putin just be able to go in freely and would never have to worry about any kind of a retaliation on the part of anybody?
Republicans are saying Putin never would have dared this had Trump been president.
Well, and another off the wall point of view is Trump would probably believe that he, because of his great negotiating skills and his friendship, he might actually think that he could influence Putin. I don't think Biden thinks he has any influence over Putin, but I think Trump, with his ego and all of that, might just think to himself, I'll get on a plane and I will go see him and we'll stop this.
He would have stopped it, I think, by handing Ukraine back to Putin on a silver platter.
Consider this, Trump, the reason he was impeached the first time was because he wanted to withhold military aid.
Yeah, I know.
From Ukraine in order to get the dirt on Biden. And he was very friendly with Putin. I agree with Tom. He would have just said, fine, you go right ahead.
Bob, you've been trying to put in a word in edgewise here.
Sorry about this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I was trying to put in edgewise there, but as you're talking about it now, it seems to me that, you know, if you want to reference back to Trump, he could care less about NATO. I think that he was really, you know, he was just treating the European nations, I think, badly. And I think that I agree with Tom. I think that he would have just
Yes.
said, welcome, Putin, this is your country now, you take it. And, you know, if you're going to get rid of Zelensky, well, that's fine. He didn't treat me well, so I'm not going to go. I think he would have done that.
Yeah.
I think maybe Trump is really a Russian operative.
Well, I've wondered that.
No, he's a self-operative.
Huh?
Trump's a self-operative.
Yeah, I know.
You know, Trump owned the Miss Universe contest that was held, and they were held in Russia. And Trump and Putin schmoozed with each other during these Miss Universe contests. You know, they're people that, and who's that? Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh.
For a while, we saw some videos of him with Trump going to,
Yes.
you know,
Well,
while, you know, just put Putin in there too. You know, these are brothers, you know, that could sit down and every time I saw Trump with Putin, I saw Trump as deferential to Putin, not the other way around.
Exactly.
I
I
agree
don't,
with
and
you.
I don't think there's anything that Trump did in his 4 years in the White House that disappointed Putin or is evidence that he wasn't a Russian agent.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
I'm just glad that Biden is the president.
yeah.
Well, enjoy it while it lasts.
I think it's going to be, George, I think you'll be a one-term president. I think you will not run a second time.
He has indicated he will.
Well, if he can, he will, unless
Well,
he's,
he can't say anything else at this point because
Right.
he's a lame duck.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's a thing down out here called the Marin Speaker Series, and they've been bringing in, you know, about the 8 sessions during the wintertime speakers. And, you know, Marin County, San Francisco, mostly liberal people. We had Madeleine Albright at one point. She just passed away. Clinton spoke, but 2 or 3 years ago, Biden spoke. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed with him when he spoke.
Really?
You know, yeah, he was very sharp. I hear people saying he's got Alzheimer's or whatever he's got. Did you see, George Ferrick, you put me onto that Heather Cox Richardson?
yes.
You know, she did an interview with him a month or so ago, and he
It's worth seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, he reminded me in that interview of the guy that I heard a few years ago. I thought he was.
Yeah.
All I can say is I just feel right now that he's the right man in the right place, at least in this situation, because he's uniting the opposition.
He
He's
is.
done a very good job, I think, with
Yeah.
it. And I'm not particularly a Biden fan, but
No.
Well, do you think his wife and he stand around and say, holy shit, what did I get into when I wanted to be president? Did he
no.
ever
don't.
envision this
I
type
think
of
he
thing?
loves it.
But I think he's risen to the occasion as much as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gary.
I'm offended by a lot of those people who say, you know, that he's senile or whatever.
Yeah.
He just happens to be 3 days older than me. And, I tell my parishioners the reason I'm retiring is I'm going to run for president. But most of kind of the slip ups or whatever in speech, if you watch it closely, they're mechanical.
Yeah.
Yes.
They come,
Yeah.
you know, we speak in public, we know what, you know, those things are.
Yeah.
And they're mechanical. They're things that come from, you know, his trouble as a child with
Yeah.
stuttering and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But of course, people are going to grab on to anything.
Yeah.
that they
And the
can.
conservative strategy is the same on the Superior Court hearings right now. It's cheap attack, absolutely cheap attack.
Right.
You know, John, I read something that said, gee, why did the Republicans make such a big deal out of her sentences of child pornographers? Why were they trying to portray her as
Soft.
super lenient? You know why? Because they're appealing to the QAnon people
Yeah,
that are in their base.
right.
That's what that whole charade was about,
Yeah.
wrote somebody.
They had nothing.
And when I read that article column, I said, oh my God, that's immediately true, I mean, that's the case.
Who
Those
knows,
assholes.
and who can explain to me the basis of that QAnon? I know it's kind of permeating, but it's like it's a mystery background, from Mars or someplace. Does anybody really understand what that whole thing is?
I think 60 Minutes did a thing about QAnon at one point. There's some guy,
Yeah.
some guy was kind of QAnon. Who did we lose? We lost somebody. I don't know. Tim.
Yeah, you can look it up. Yeah, it's it kind of scares you that just one or two people can end up planting the seed that grows into such a thing, and that a lot of people will just scoop it up, and just go for that.
It's what strikes me is, even if they're not a college educated person, I think Americans should be able to think.
Yeah, but it's shocking. Yeah.
Lack of critical thinking. Absolutely, Bob. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like they've never had a course in critical thinking or, at the high school that my stepkids went to, the teacher did a course on watching television and observing commercials, and commenting on them, and, just to develop a sense of being able to think critically, and in the media.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people somebody says something and they don't think about who's saying it, and anything about the background of the person. They just don't turn to the subject, who is it who's saying this?
That's the danger.
Where's it coming from?
That's the danger of the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
It is, yep.
It sure is.
Now Ned's back, but where's Tim?
Tim, remember
Tim said he had to leave early.
Oh, that's right.
Tim said he had to get an X-ray at 3 o'clock, something like that.
That's right. I think one of the prime factors involved there with the QAnon types is fear. And fear that they are going to lose something of their privilege as Americans, their freedoms.
Right.
And, then that fear gets played upon by that whole propaganda. Without my guns to protect my freedoms, I will be enslaved.
Somebody did an analysis several years ago of Fox News commercials and the commercials sponsoring Bill O'Reilly, et cetera.
Mhm.
And the analysis led to this conclusion that this was a very fearful target audience because the commercials were for things like, oh man, there's going to be a financial crash. You better have your assets in gold. Buy Krugerrands, buy this. It was all the commercials were very disproportionately fear-based and about self-protection.
Uh-huh.
So that sure supports that theory that it's all fear.
Well, I think also that there is an underlying fear that people observe when they find out that the demographics of the country are going to be that by mid-century, whites are going to be in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really threatening, it seems to me, to a lot of people, because what gets rolled into that is our culture, our privileges, et cetera, maybe our economic well-being. What will they do to us? And that, it seems to me, is a substratum for all the other kinds of fears
I
that are
agree.
rising up in
And
society.
I think that's part of what stirred the pot on the January 6th invasion of the capital.
Mhm.
Oh, there's no question about
Well,
that.
that brings up an idea of the, urban rural divide too, because I like living in a place where I can go to an Indian, Vietnamese, Filipino, Mexican restaurant, and if I go to some cities that are listed as the top 10 affordable cities by ARP, there's none of that there, and I don't want to live someplace where, growing up in an integrated city like Los Angeles with all kinds of different cultures, that's kind of my idea of America. But somebody in Iowa or who knows, some little town anywhere, somebody who's a different color or language would be strange, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Diversity,
Yes.
that kind of diversity is not a part of what the quote heartland of America thinks is America.
I was just thinking the two coasts as different from the heartland, yes?
Mhm.
I almost blew a fuse in the 2008 election when Sarah Palin, talking in some rural Pennsylvania town, spoke about you are the real Americans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And at the time, my Chicano son-in-law was in Afghanistan fighting for those rural, in theory, for those real Americans. And I sort of thought of him as a real American,
Yeah.
And that was just outrageous to me. I had to peel me off the ceiling when she said that.
I'm
She
waiting.
was the precursor to Trump. I mean, she was the John the Baptist of Trump. I mean, there's no.
I'm waiting for Donald Trump to go the way of Sarah Palin. Just become out there on the margins somewhere. We're just, out there by himself. So, doing.
Oh, but don't forget there's Ivanka. We haven't heard the last from her.
The dynasty, I know.
But it's also a mistake for us not to, Hillary Clinton lost that election because she didn't follow the advice of her husband and pay attention to white working class people.
Right.
We lost that election by 70,000 votes in 3 states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And because she only lost 20,000 here, 20,000 there, but it was in 3 states, so she lost all those electoral college votes.
Yeah.
Had she paid some attention, more attention to those people. So we need to find, it seems to me, some kind of a way of bringing together, people who have legitimate concerns about their future.
Exactly.
And the concerns that sometimes are exaggerated by people who want to control them.
Yeah. And the people that did go for Trump didn't realize that he'd be the last person in the world to have their concerns met by him, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that their tax bills wouldn't be reflected in the fact that, he was all for them.
Yeah.
And that's his only legislative victory was the tax bill. He got nothing else through.
Right.
But what you're saying, Frank, is true. In that Marin speaker series about, I don't know how many years ago, it was in the during the 2016 election cycle. One of the speakers was this guy, Paul Begala. He was a commentator on CNN a lot. And he said, what you need to understand about the popularity of Donald Trump is there's a whole segment of the American population whose incomes have not risen, over a number of years, that they've stayed the same, and they're the ones, exactly what you're saying.
But it's because of people like Trump that they haven't, right? You know what I mean?
Well, and add on to that, Gary, the cultural thing that who addressed it? I guess Bob did. I mean, you're not progressing economically, you're falling behind. The factory where your dad worked and your grandpa worked is now closed. And white people are shrinking in numbers relatively. And I try to get into their shoes and I think about it. And I am very comfortable with the Hispanic onslaught, or whatever we could call it in this country. I speak the language. I've married two of the women. I like the culture very, very, very much.
And their food.
The only virgin to whom I'm devoted in the whole panoply of them is Our Lady of Guadalupe, etc. And I asked myself, well, George, okay, great. How would you feel if these were Hindus? You know, when the women had little red dots on their foreheads, and temples were springing up with Vishnu instead of.
Isn't there quite a bit of that on the East Coast?
Yeah,
Yes,
instead of mariachi masses, which I happen to
Yeah.
love, you know.
there is. I live in a town that 30 years ago was 71% Jewish. Now it's in the low 40s. And if you read the real estate transactions every week, you'll see that the people who are moving in are Indians, Pakistanis, South Asians, etc. And of course, they're highly educated. They have big jobs, usually in healthcare.
Yes.
But it is true that we are beginning to see, and then we're seeing around here, you know, establishments of mosques, Hindu temples, etc. My weekend associate is the Parkman Professor of Divinity at Harvard. He's actually the incoming president of the Catholic Theological Society of America, and his expertise is comparative theology, and he's an expert on Hinduism.
Wow.
And so,
Eric, you need to know this guy.
huh?
George Ferrick needs to know this guy.
Yeah, I think you gave his name. What's his name again?
Frank Clooney. He's a
Frank Clooney.
Jesuit.
Okay, yeah.
And so he's regularly gets called, you know, or even around here to come to a local Hindu temple
Yeah.
to give a talk or something, and to talk about Catholicism and its interaction with Hinduism.
Yeah, there were Benedictines involved in that like 50 years ago, Bede Griffiths and others
Yeah,
who went to India and became involved in that. And
right.
Anthony de Mello, for example, a Jesuit, more recently was very much involved in Buddhist types of stuff,
Right.
coming from India, from a very Catholic, you know, Jesuits are very strong in India in some places.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The Catholics are too. There's
Yeah.
pockets of Catholicism in India.
yeah.
It's very strong. Yeah.
There's a
Just
lot
to
of
mention
Muslim.
an irony about QAnon. There's this wonderful book. It's called In Praise of the Useless Life, a monk's memoir by Paul QAnon. Quenon. A monk of Get Seminary. Talk about an unfortunate name.
Unfortunate is right.
Is that-
Oh my.
It's actually a wonderful book. He's an
Is that what
associate.
you're, Frank, is that what you're reading in preparation for your retirement?
No. I think I read it for my 75th birthday or something, but anyway. But it's just a very interesting kind of collision, if you will.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Frank, don't trivialize in your mind the impact retirement will have on you. Be ready for it. I don't know how
Well,
one does it.
I retired before. I retired in 2004. My wife was disabled for 12 years before she died, so I retired to care for her. So I've been through that, and
Yeah,
this time I'm going to live part-time in a rectory in Boston, in South Boston. 2 or 3 nights a week, help out, and then the rest of the week in my own home. So
that sounds good.
Before we finish, I'd like to put the ball back in Ned Shavira's court, because what George Crook brought up about the West Coast and the Hispanic influence. Why don't you tell the group what your 2 sons do and how many children they have?
But unmute yourself, Ned.
Okay.
It's up towards the top, I think.
Well, he needs his
Put your
glasses.
glasses on, Ned. There you, no,
Put your
Can you hear
glass-
me now?
There we go.
There you are.
All right. Okay, I'll tell you about my kids. The oldest is a reflection of my wife, who is Irish German. He's blonde, very, very fair skinned, has a Polish, I think German wife. Their kids,
Polish American.
pardon me? American, yes.
Yeah.
As you've seen, I sent you a picture of them. They're all blonde, blue-eyed or brown.
Is that the family that has 6?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. He's a very successful in his job. He's got a PhD in artificial intelligence and computer science. I guess that's all one thing, and has just a very good job. He's going to be able to take care of his large family very well. He has some qualms because of his very right wing take on life, and he has a lot of food in a manner that will last a long time down. He's got one of the few guys, I don't know anybody else in California that's got a basement. He's got a big, huge
Ned, you're frozen.
Frozen.
basement. And he us that we need to do the same thing. We need to have a gun, stuff like that. The other one lives in, here I am in Palos Verdes, not too far from where you are, Tom. With very poor reception, as you noticed.
Yeah.
yeah.
Whoops, you're frozen again.
He'll be back.
Oh, am I gone?
It passed-
Not
You're back.
anymore.
You're back
Oh.
now.
Okay. They're very, very successful. He's married to a Salvadorian woman who's got a lot of success in spirituality. She works at LMU. So, okay, it's a large family. Grandchildren, as we are now. Am I gone again?
No,
No,
You're
you're,
back.
Hello?
you were.
It's kind of off and on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very poor
Yeah.
connection. I live in a neighborhood.
Yeah. We're gonna have to wait until next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Anyway,
we're gonna have
Johnny,
to wait.
Johnny, what was the point you wanted to make?
About how the next
The-
2 or 3
oh.
generations of Hispanic connection are all over the spectrum. My
Uh-huh.
youngest daughter is married to Mike Rubio, who is 4th generation Hispanic. And, they get Spanish language from their grandparents. They've got 3 kids. They're very successful. I just think the roots are going down very deep with the Hispanic community on the West
agree.
Coast.
And on the
John?
East Coast too, there's a lot of intermarriage between Asian and Caucasian too.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
popular and all along the California coast.
In Orange County, it's you go to University of California at Irvine and into the library, and it's hard to find somebody that's not Asian. You go to Cal State Fullerton, which is just down the street from where we are, and again, very, very, very Asian. They're very striving, disciplined folk.
Did you hear what UCLA means? University of Caucasians lost among Asians.
You know, one
That's a
thing,
keeper. Thank you.
yeah,
You know, Ned, what you're saying reminds me of a story about my daughter, who is half Anglo and half Chicana. I remember in school, she had written some autobiography, and it said, and my ex-wife had me read it, it said, "My mother and I are Mexican Americans. My father is an Anglo." And I just thought that was so funny. And I remember laughing about it. And my son looked at me, was in the conversation, and said, "Well, what's your problem, Grigo?" And that was in the 80s, you know, or 70s.
But John, that is the way it is. I mean, I look at the Hispanic community of St. Vincent's. I mean, the kids of the first generation people, they're going to marry Mexican people. You know, they're gonna most of the Mexican kids that I've known whose parents came over to this country, when they got married, they married from within the Hispanic community, but their kids are not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the normal process. Just the
Yes.
normal.
well, you know,
You come
I
to my
just-
parish here in Sharon, and we have a lot of a fair number of parishioners who are Catholics married to Jews.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
you come, you know, one of our key people in our finance committee is Jewish.
Yeah.
Just volunteered to serve. His wife is Catholic. So
Perfect.
George Crook and I just received invitations from local high school in Boyle Heights. He went to, did he go to Yale, George?
Alberto, yes,
And law school. And
Stanford Law School.
Stanford Law, and it's going to be the 50th anniversary of this particular class, and so they're going to hold, in a nice.
I'll fill in.
Go ahead, George.
He's back.
Frank and Bob, do you remember for our ordination, we had our families were able to come over for ordination in December, back in December of 1967. So one of the people in my party, I had a very small party, but one was Max Hammer from North Dakota. My mother was from North Dakota, from kind of Luxembourgish, you know, German, Austrian type farmers. And Max Hammer was kind of a farmer, a scion, and I learned from him that when my mother married my dad, who came from Irish, Scottish background, they really did not see that favorably at all. You know, that was really something that they saw her as jumping ship or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now, you know, but it was interesting to me to find that, you know, that they saw my mom who left North Dakota and came out to California and met my dad, who comes from Irish, Scottish background. You know, they saw that as really not exactly wrong, but you know,
Yeah.
not the thing to
Well-
do. Yeah.
Well, in Boston, it happened when I moved into this parish. I met my second cousin, Ralph Generazzo. And when Ralph's mother married Joe Generazzo, she was Ralph's grandmother, and my grandmother were sisters.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And people would say Generazzo and Daly. I mean, how do we get there? And his mother was somewhat ostracized from the family
Yeah.
when she married an Italian
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Just one little tidbit in terms of, because we talked about ordination and who ordained us. Bishop Ray, who ordained us, was the titular bishop of Macriana in Mauritania. Do you know who the titular bishop of Macriana in Mauritania is today?
Oh,
Your auxiliary, Bob Barron.
Oh, Los Angeles.
I've got to go. God bless.
See you,
Okay,
John.
John.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe we should call it quits.
Yeah.
yes.
So let me make a modest proposal.
Norman.
Modest proposal.
A modest proposal.
I have,
sorry,
just
John.
wrapped
John,
up
John,
my Zoom with
mute yourself,
John
John.
Wilbers,
Oops.
George
John,
Barrick,
No, he wants
Gary
us to hear.
Lombardi, George Crook,
Oh.
Ned Shavira, and Tim Almy.
Is that Norm?
Oh, we'll invite you
That's Norm.
sometime.
That's
We have
undoubtedly.
invited Fred Lawrence and a number of others for guest appearances. So yeah, we'll get you in.
John, can you,
Well-
John Grimmer?
Well, that's where this Zoom has been a blessing and the possibility of a reunion as we're all approaching age 80 or have reached it.
Yeah, John, you should mute yourself.
Have you had any conversation at Alamany about the possibility of
Can you mute him?
during
Well,
the summertime?
John
that we
Bremer,
would Use that.
John, mute yourself.
You can mute him,
Tom,
You can
Tom, you
him
should
as a
mute him. Tom.
participant.
I muted him.
Okay.
I can
great.
get rid of him too, I think.
Okay,
Let's see.
It's not a capital crime.
George has a modest proposal.
Here's my
George.
modest proposal. Unless you guys already talked about this at length in the session I missed most of, I would love to hear what Frank and Bob's experiences are with young clergy.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a topic that the more I talk around is just riveting me because they're scaring the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it occurs to me that maybe Frank, when he went back into the priesthood, had to spend some time with these kids as sort of a second seminarianship or something, and would have had a real culture shock, perhaps. I don't know. And I just like to see what you guys think, because
Yeah.
it's bedeviling me.
And the other thing is, Frank, I'd like to know next time we get together, what you did in between. When you left the priesthood and when you got back. I mean, what did you do in between? Because you
Well, read the gospel on Sunday,
okay, I will.
the prodigal son.
Okay.
He had a wonderful life.
A life of dissolution.
Right.
I was
there
thinking in
with
terms
the
of
husks
work
of
is what I was
okay.
thinking in terms of.
My 5-year Lent.
But I mean, because you kept very current. I mean, it's I'm just impressed with both of them. But I'm so glad this is wonderful. I'm glad
Well,
that
thank you for having us.
Yeah.
both
It
of you.
really, really is.
Well, shall we continue next week on the same vein? And Bob and Frank, you're still
Yes.
with us?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But it's our last hurrah, it seems to me, as a group, or as this group.
And hopefully we'll see George Crook at home.
Yes.
I
Right.
think
Well,
that's for sure, a guarantee.
I have to withdraw on that. I have an appointment for the service to my car at 1 o'clock, which is when you guys start.
Yeah.
So I might be able to check in later, but won't be there at 1.
Okay.
You know
Well,
what, Bob, if you could take an iPad with you and while you're sitting around, tune us in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm supposed to have lunch with my brother while the car's being taken
Oh,
care of.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's a good thing. Okay.
I'll do what I can. Hope
Another
to be out
time,
there.
Bob. Yeah.
God bless everybody.
Yes.
Thank
We'll
you.
see
Right.
what happens.
Thank you.
Okay.
Watch out. Bye-bye.
God bless you all.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Adios,
And,
everybody.
Shall we end it?
Thank you, Tom.
Here goes nothing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.